Have you ever wondered what really protects your rights when the system fails you? When the odds are stacked against you, and the law seems distant, there's a safety net hidden in the fabric of democracy: constitutional remedies. These are not just lifelines, they are the pulse of justice in action. If you think laws are just words on paper, think again. Constitutional remedies are where the words leap off the page and transform into shields, protecting you, your family, and your future. But let me ask you something. Do you truly know your rights? Think of a moment when you felt powerless, whether it was facing discrimination, losing access to a basic right, or watching others suffer in silence. That knot in your stomach, that mix of anger and helplessness, what if I told you the Constitution has a built-in answer for those moments? Sounds dramatic, doesn't it? But it's true. Now, before we get too serious, let's lighten it up. Imagine if the Constitution were a superhero, call it Justice Man, or maybe the Defender. Its superpower? Constitutional remedies. Whether it's standing up to unfair laws or holding power accountable, it swoops in to save the day. And just like every superhero story, there's a catch: you have to know it exists, and you need to know how to call for help. So, the question is, would you recognize the call to action if it came? Here's where the real excitement begins. Constitutional remedies aren't just abstract principles taught in law schools, they're tools you can use. Think about the First Amendment, protecting freedom of speech, or the Fourth Amendment, guarding you against unlawful searches. When these rights are threatened, constitutional remedies activate, like an emergency exit you didn't know was there. It's thrilling to think that within the framework of government lies a system designed to correct itself when it goes astray. And here's the twist: sometimes, those remedies come with a fight. They've been used to shape history, from landmark civil rights cases to moments when everyday citizens stood tall against giants. But what happens when the stakes are higher than ever, and these remedies are the last line of defense? Stick around because, in the next section, we'll dive into real-world examples of how these remedies have changed the course of history. Some of them will inspire you, and others might just shock you into realizing how fragile rights can be without them. You don't want to miss this, because the power to understand constitutional remedies might just be the most important knowledge you'll gain today. Let's turn to the stories where constitutional remedies didn't just work, they defined the course of history. These are the moments where individuals stood against all odds, armed with nothing but their knowledge of the Constitution. And the results? Transformative. Let's start with one of the most iconic cases, Brown versus Board of Education. In the 1950s, segregation was the law of the land, and schools were no exception. Black children were forced into separate, and often inferior schools, their futures limited by the color of their skin. But constitutional remedies came into play when a brave group of parents, led by Oliver Brown, challenged this injustice. The Supreme Court's decision to strike down segregation wasn't just a legal victory, it was a seismic shift in American society. Could you imagine the courage it took to confront an entire system? It's moments like these that remind us of the sheer power of constitutional remedies. But it's not always about monumental cases. Sometimes these remedies are about personal stories. Take the Fourth Amendment, which protects you from unlawful searches and seizures. Picture this: a young woman, falsely accused, finds police searching her home without a warrant. Her rights were violated, but she fought back. The court sided with her, sending a clear message: no authority, no matter how powerful, is above the Constitution. What would you have done in her place? Would you have known to stand your ground? Here's another example to shake things up: Roe versus Wade. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, this case is a masterclass in how constitutional remedies can provoke national debates and shape policy for generations. The case centered on a woman's right to privacy, and the court's interpretation of the 14th Amendment created ripple effects that are still felt today. Now, let's reset for a second. Imagine if these remedies didn't exist. What if the government could silence dissent without consequence? What if your property could be taken without due process? It's a chilling thought, right? The mere existence of constitutional remedies doesn't just protect you, it sets the boundaries for those in power. It's like a referee in a high-stakes game, except the stakes are your rights, your freedom, and sometimes even your life. But here's where it gets tricky. Invoking these remedies isn't always easy. It takes knowledge, persistence, and often immense courage. Many people don't even realize they have the power to demand these protections. So, what's the secret to making sure these rights remain within reach? In the next section, we'll uncover how you can equip yourself with the tools to use constitutional remedies when you need them most. Whether you're dealing with an overreach of authority, or standing up for someone who can't fight for themselves, knowing how to act could make all the difference. Don't miss it. This is where the empowerment begins.